Super Typhoon Meranti edges closer to the region. The CE says the target of 17,000 flats for a Yunlong public housing project remains on track. And violence in a Guangdong village following the arrest of protest leaders.
Hello and a very good evening. The Hong Kong Observatory says it will consider issuing the standby signal number 1 tomorrow morning as Super Typhoon Meranti approaches the South China coast. The weather is expected to deteriorate over the Mid-Autumn Festival holiday, and Rachel Leung tells us more.
The weather in Hong Kong remained mostly calm today with some isolated showers and thunderstorms. But this is expected to change as Meranti edges closer to the region. The storm is expected to cross the Luzon Straits and move towards the vicinity of eastern Guangdong and Fujian in the next couple of days.
The observatory will issue the standby signal number 1 tomorrow morning. And whether the observatory will issue a higher signal, the strong wind signal number 3, will depend on how far the tropical cyclone is away from Hong Kong and its intensity.
Rain is expected during the Mid-Autumn Festival holiday, so those who are thinking of going out, it will be wise to bring along an umbrella. Meanwhile, Taiwan is already feeling the effects as Meranti edges closer. Sea and land warnings for the typhoon were issued today. Taiwan's Central Weather Bureau says Meranti is expected to make landfall at around midnight. It also warns there may be flooding in the southern coastal parts of the island. Rachel Leung, TVB News.
Chief Executive Leung has denied there is any collusion between the government and organized crime over land issues, something which has been alleged by elected lawmaker Eddie Chu. Leung also said the goal of building 17,000 public housing flats in Yunlong was on track, despite having to revise the initial target. Caleb Leung has more.
The fallout continues from last week's revelations that newly elected lawmaker and environmental activist Eddie Chu had received death threats against him and his family. Chu claims it stems from his activism over a public housing project which is being planned for Wang Chau in Yunlong. The government wants to build 17,000 public housing units there, but that number has since been reduced to about 4,000. Today, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying sought to clarify the issue, insisting the government wasn't backing down from its original goal. He says the target of 17,000 flats has not been changed. The building of 4,000 units is only the first phase of the project. Leung says the government has always dealt with the easier issues first and the harder ones later. Leung also denied Chu's claims of alleged collusion between the government, developers, rural leaders, and the triads over development plans in the new territories. He stressed the government would never cooperate or compromise with the triads and would remain tough in fighting organized crime. The chief executive also said the police have conducted extensive raids on the triads in the new territories over the past few days. He has ordered the police chief to enhance work in this area. Meanwhile, police officers were dispatched to Wing Ning Chun and Wang Chau as part of investigations into the threats made against Chu. Wing Ning Chun will form part of the first phase of the Wang Chau public housing project. Chu has helped villagers there protest against the resumption of land there as part of the project. Police are providing round-the-clock protection to Chu and his family. They are also conducting a comprehensive investigation. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Guangdong riot police fired rubber bullets and arrested 13 people in an early morning crackdown to suppress weeks of demonstrations in the village of Wukan. Villagers have been protesting against what they see is the unjust jailing of their village leader on corruption charges.
Things are tense in the Guangdong village of Wukan and have been for many weeks ever since village leader Lin Zuluan was charged and eventually jailed last Thursday for corruption. Wukan residents were outraged, saying his 37-month sentence was completely unjust. But after weeks of protests in support of Lin, riot police made their move in the early hours this morning. They arrested the leaders of the demonstrations in their homes. Authorities detained 13 people on charges of inciting a mob and spreading rumours. Rubber bullets and tear gas were reportedly used against villagers who tried to fight back against the police. Reports say many were wounded in the resulting clashes. Videos posted on social media showed at least one person with blood on his arm and chest, and another being treated for an apparent bullet wound on his hand. Wukhan carries symbolic importance due to the success of the 2011 protests that broke out over land seizures and corruption. Villagers were able to expel government officials and police and barricaded the village. The siege was resolved only after the provincial secretary of the ruling Communist Party agreed to allow a local election. The winner of that election was Leung Zuluan, a former protest leader. Lin was planning to lead a new round of protests this year over more land grabs. Instead, authorities detained him and then charged him with taking bribes. Lin's supporters say he was wrongfully charged and have staged more than 80 straight days of rallies ever since he was detained. Those protests continued after his sentence was announced last week, despite official state warnings to disperse. And today, the authorities finally put their foot down, with Wukhan now under lockdown for the time being.
In a show of force to prove it's ready to defend its ally, the U.S. military flew 2 U.S. supersonic bombers over South Korea against North Korea's 5th nuclear test last week. The 2 B-1 Lancer strategic bombers conducted a low-altitude flight over Osan Air Base in South Korea. That's about 77 kilometers from the demilitarized zone border with the north. The bombers, capable of carrying the largest payload of weapons among U.S. Air Force aircraft, were escorted by South Korean and U.S. fighter jets. The U.S. military reiterated that if the North triggers a military provocation, they'll be met with a firm response. South Korean intelligence stated the North has the ability to detonate another atomic device at any time. This prompted nuclear envoys from South Korea and the U.S. to meet in Seoul to discuss their response to Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions.
Well, South Korea's nuclear operator was forced to shut down 4 reactors at a nuclear power complex after not 1 but 2 earthquakes struck the country's southeast. The earthquakes of magnitude 5.1 and magnitude 5.8 respectively occurred last night near the city of Gwangju. Gwangju was the capital of the Korean Peninsula's ancient kingdoms and is now a popular tourist destination. South Korea's meteorological agency says the 5.8 quake was the strongest recorded in the country. There was no serious damage and only 2 people suffered minor injuries. The jolts also caused tall buildings to sway in Seoul.
China's Air Force conducted military drills in the Bashi Channel that separates Taiwan and the Philippines. The Air Force called the exercises part of normal annual planned drills and in accordance with international law. They included early warning and in-flight refueling to help improve the force's fighting ability far from home. They come as China has been increasingly asserting itself in disputes in the South China Sea. Chinese and Russian naval vessels are currently holding an 8-day exercise in the northern waters of the South China Sea to upgrade their joint marine defense capability.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte said today he has no intention of cutting ties with his allies, particularly the United States. This comes just a day after he called for the withdrawal of U.S. Special Forces from the southern Philippines. Alan Buckner reports.
It was Duterte's first public statement opposing the presence of American troops. He said he wants the U.S. forces out of his country's south, blaming Americans for inflaming Muslim insurgencies in the region.
Special forces, they have to go. They have to go in Mindanao out of respect. Or I do not want a rift with America. But they have to go.
Duterte, known for his terse words and volatile temperament, said an American troop presence would complicate offensives against Islamic militants notorious for beheading Westerners. Washington deployed special forces in the southern Philippines in 2002 to train and advise local units fighting Abu Sayyaf rebels. Duterte was in the spotlight last week as well when he used coarse language directed at U.S. President Barack Obama for criticizing the Philippine president over the numerous deaths in his war on drugs. He wasn't backing down last night. The Philippine president repeated comments from last week when he accused the United States of committing atrocities against Muslims over a century ago on Holo Island.
Mr. Obama, when you accuse me of killing, which you do not have also the facts anyway, whether legitimately killed in an encounter with the police or those simply murdered by their cohorts, and you said Duterte hurting words. What? You cannot even, you have not even apologized to the Filipino nation.
Duterte's latest comments add uncertainty about what impact his presidency will have on ties with Washington. The White House says it has not received a formal request to remove military personnel. A spokesman said Duterte has a tendency to make colorful comments and drew a comparison with Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. Alan Bucknia, TVB News.
Hillary Clinton is facing a major political fallout after she nearly fainted from a bout of pneumonia that her campaign hid from the public for 2 days. While her supporters remain unconcerned, critics worry if she lied about that. What other ailments is she hiding? Sonia Terra reports.
Clinton's health scare fallout has her campaign in damage control for not disclosing she had pneumonia 2 days prior to her collapsing. Video that went viral, what critics call a health crisis Clinton purposely tried to cover up, is once again raising issues of whether voters can trust her.
If she hadn't lost some blood pressure and hadn't felt faint at the event, we might never have known that she had pneumonia. After all,
there were signs the 68-year-old was sicker than she let on a week ago when she battled an incessant cough while campaigning. Faced with pressure to release more of her medical records, Clinton staffers promised to do just that as a way to prove her pneumonia is minor and she is fit to be president. But this medical ethics expert warns the electorate physicians only reveal what patients tell them to.
Their doctors know that they have a duty to their patient of privacy, and the candidates can spin or control what's released.
Clinton supporters are calling the health scare much ado about nothing.
I do feel like the media is making a big deal out of it when I think there's probably more important issues.
I think it'll be used by Trump to say, oh, she's weak, she's not strong enough to be president, which I think is a bunch of garbage.
While Clinton remains on bed rest with antibiotics for a couple of days at home, her husband Bill says she's doing fine, but admitted fainting spells are commonplace for Hillary.
Rarely, but on more than one occasion over the last many, many years, the same sort of things happened to her when she just got severely dehydrated.
Bill says he'll take Hillary's place until she is ready to resume presidential campaigning. Sonia Artero, TVB News.
But more importantly, former British Prime Minister David Cameron is standing down as a Member of Parliament weeks after his government lost the referendum on the UK's membership of the European Union. Cameron's surprise announcement will trigger a by-election in Witney, which has been a safe seat for his Conservative Party for several decades. He won a general election last year, but his political fortune shifted overnight in June when the UK voted to leave the EU. Cameron had said he would continue as an MP until the next election, but concluded it made more sense for him to leave public office altogether.
In my view, with modern politics, with the circumstances of my resignation, it isn't really possible to be a proper backbench MP as a former Prime Minister. I think everything you do will become a big distraction and a big diversion from what the government needs to do for our country.
And still ahead. The Ombudsman says a rising trend of LCST lifeguards abusing their sick leave. Hong Kong People's performance in an international English test ranked 3rd among Asian candidates. And France bans plastic dishware and cups.